I am so pleased to have you here today.
Yay.
My name is Everett. You're definitely one of the guys that I think about when I see this is a guy who's living a pretty good life, and who has got a lot going on in his life. And I actually didn't realize until fairly recently that you've been divorced for a little while. And so can you set the context for me and for whoever's watching this? Where are you now in life, just in terms of those basics, how long you've been divorced?
Sure. So we were together for 10 years, married for 7, had a child who was 6 at the time of the divorce, or 5 at the time of the divorce. I got divorced about 4 years ago, or separated 4 years ago. So moved into this house almost exactly 4 years ago. The divorce was finalized about a year after that.
So 10 years you were together with your ex-wife. That's pretty good length of relationship. Is that the longest one that you've had?
Yeah, for sure.
So good. You must have really figured out a lot. But I start with the big question.
Yeah.
Which is, are you happy now?
Yeah. Not even close to where I was before. So much better on so many different levels. And just for context, I got divorced, my father died, I moved, learned how to be a single dad here in this house, and I got broken into and they stole my national championship ring, all within the first 4 months of 2012. So that was
That's a bad year.
It was a bad. Yeah. There was no place to go but up after that.
Well,
I just blew your mind.
No, it does blow my mind. And a thing that I struggled with and continue to struggle with when I ask myself, "Am I happy?"
Yeah.
I often feel that I'm happy, and especially if I play back some of the times I've really been down.
Yeah.
And when you talk about being at the bottom, that's a lot of bad things.
Right.
How confident are you? How do you know that you are truly happy? Because sometimes I feel like it's maybe I only think I'm happy in comparison to before. I mean, it was so long since I've known happiness. I'm not convinced that I know what happiness really feels like.
Right. Multi-layered question on a couple different levels. One is, for me, happiness is sort of one of the things I try and be, but sort of living kind of a full life or an intentional life sometimes means I have to accept that happiness doesn't come with the package at that moment. And that's fine. Am I kind of doing the things that I want to do? Am I spending the time with the people I want? Do I have any toxic people in my life? Do I have any toxic activities in my life? That's one measure. Another measure is when I was at the depth, I felt like everything was happening to me, and all I was doing was being able to respond. So literally, there were days where I'm up, I'm breathing. Yeah. Okay, that's good enough. The rest of the day might not be any better than this, but I'm up and I'm breathing. Now, I feel like I have so many things that I feel grateful for, I feel motivated by, energized by. So it's a sense of sort of purpose, I think, is also a part of where I feel like I'm, is a great measure looking backwards.
One of the phrases that I picked up on there, and there are a lot of them related to this, is about living an intentional life. I think of it the same way, living an authentic life. Mm-hmm. And those phrases are, of course, things that, being in the Bay Area, we hear a lot. I've been out here long enough. But I still consider myself an East Coast guy, and I didn't really know until recently that you grew up on the East Coast. I knew you were a Dookie, national championship there, in case folks are wondering what that reference is to. And coming from that East Coast background, it was very strange for me to hear about all this kind of hippie talk.
Right.
Did you have that kind of difficulty when you were exposed to those concepts when you came out here, or did you have those concepts before in your upbringing and your mindset?
Well, my parents, we went to church all the time. I grew up in sort of a Southern Baptist black church, so there was a sense of spirituality, of community, of Feeling blessed was a term. There's a vernacular around some of these things that was different than what I use now, but conceptually it was there. I started actually meditating in '93. Read a book by Thich Nhat Hanh, Miracle of Mindfulness. A friend of mine had been trying to push in my hand for 3 years. That gave me a very different vernacular, and that introduced me to a lot of these concepts. And I really appreciate it because it was not about sort of lofty things. It was about a person who had gotten kicked out of Vietnam for like trying to save his people during the middle of this war, and he was about engagement. And so that gave me kind of a rock to stand on, so that by the time I came out here, I sort of had a practice already.
Yeah. And
for me, the thing that keeps it grounded is practice. It's just practice. Anytime, any day, daily, weekly, whatever. That's what, for me, is the difference between kind of it being really foreign and something that's very grounded and understandable.
How does that practice manifest? Is it in a specific meditation plan, basically? Or?
Yeah. So what I do, I mean, I was a yoga teacher for a while, so that was a part of the practice. With meditation, it's anywhere from 10 minutes to 30 minutes a day. And that depends, there's some days, some weeks or months even that I don't do a formal. But generally, it's insight meditation with aspects of vipassana, for those who really are interested in the details, that I find really, really helpful. It's just sitting and paying attention to breath and noticing emotions as they come, or sensations and so forth, and not getting hooked on any of it. In some ways, for me, what's been useful is even the things where you're like, wow, I have this great nirvana, I just saw this vision. It's ephemeral. It's one of those things that I shouldn't be any more paying attention to than feelings of despair or so forth and so on. I watch them. I'm feeling really shitty right now. Okay. Watch it pass. And then the next moment there might be silence. And then there might be this incredible vision. Wow, I'm having incredible vision. That's a vision. Watch it pass. And that starts to equilibrate all these feelings. And back when things were really bad, that was really helpful because I could do that at any time.
I'm impressed, as I always have been, about how sort of well-balanced internally you seem, and now I hear you are, and how long you've had such a good sort of, I think, internal compass and these tools to continue to make your way through life. But now I'm a little confused. Is there an explanation, a concise explanation you would give to how you ended up in this significant life relationship that wasn't one that I assume you know had the length that you imagined it would?
Right. Because I'm balanced doesn't mean I make great choices. And I think the reason we came together, and just for context, we actually have a phenomenal relationship now. It's been 4 years. I'd say for a year and a half, after divorce, it was definitely intense, and sometimes in unexpected ways. But we've been able to sort of manage that. I frankly didn't fully understand what I was getting into. And more importantly, I didn't fully represent to myself what I really wanted. And third, people shift and change. And I know that, whatever. But I didn't really have a language to understand, well, how do you deal with that? When the person that you thought you were marrying, or the person that you are when you got married, changes. Yeah. And there's not a lot of narratives for that I can follow, or that I followed. You're supposed to, well, what I grew up with was certainly, I didn't have a great model for marriage. My parents were not happily married, although they stayed married. Although they did a great job with the kids for the most part. Many of my friends were married and sort of seemed to live really, really exemplary lives. And so I did the best. We did the best we could. But you get to the point where things weren't working, and we realized that relatively early. And we did 4 years of therapy. So we put in a lot of effort to kind of get self-understanding and understanding with each other. But eventually, it just became a situation where we needed to stop. Yeah. That wasn't concise, but
no, but, it's actually better. It's because I think a lot of people have the same concise answer, and they're all true, but not detailed enough. The answer is I was young. I didn't know enough. I didn't know what I thought I knew.
Right. The funny thing is, I bet people would say that if they got married at 40, or if they got married at 20. It's like, I was young. Right. If they're 60, they say, I was 20 years ago. I didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah, your first time's always your first.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Hey, just a little digression here, but you talked about being a young person, looking around, seeing your peers getting married. Things seem to be going well. They're happy. I remember thinking that too. That gosh, look. This is the age when people get married. Everyone's doing this. It's the next step in life. And some of the early folks in my social circle who got married, I would look at as real role models and see how happy they were and what kind of life growth they were experiencing together. It's interesting how few of those marriages have stayed intact.
Right.
Has that been the case for you, or all those kids around you who got married young, they're all still happily married?
Oh, this is a good one. So I think the thing I learned was you have no idea what's going on in people's lives. Yeah. You really don't. And that actually can be a moment of compassion, right? Some people may still be married, whether they're happy or not, I don't know. What I do know is that after divorce, a friend of mine, a very wise friend of mine said, so Everett, here's what's going to happen once you tell everybody. In about 6 weeks, you're going to start getting phone calls. And they're going to be people who are friends that you think are happily married. They're going to call you up and they're going to say, so, how's it going? When did you know? What were you thinking? And you're going to realize that they're going through that struggle. They've been struggling with their partner and they're trying to figure out what's going on. And you're going to get overwhelmed. So just to warn you. And she was absolutely right. And so for me, it's... there were many people who got divorced subsequent to me who, it wasn't like I induced that, but that was the train that people were on. So I don't know. I think some people have worked things out in various ways. And I know that a lot of people who got divorced, both of them are much happier now. Yeah. So...
But this is kind of an unexpected topic, but I realize I could use some advice about this myself because I have some experiences where people I've been friends with for a long time, maybe they're starting to get little sort of cracks in their relationship. And one or the other person in the person in the relationship who's confiding in me is just hearing my own experience. And they're reflecting on it their own way. But the other person, who's also acquaintance of mine or sometimes a friend, is kind of like, we were fucking happy before you started talking to that Gene guy.
Oh, wow, wow.
That guy is a bad influence in your life. And I'm just like, wow, man.
Right, not
does that
the
ever
intention.
happen to you?
Wow, that's a good one. Not that I know of. But I know that clearly the person, kind of the other person knows of that relationship. And so I haven't heard anything directly, but clearly I'm on team A. They perceive I'm on team A. You know what I mean? Yeah. And that's what if I know both people and I know maybe one a little bit better, I've been supportive of, and I tell the person, a person on team A, that I'm supportive of both of them being able to figure out what's best for them, and particularly if they have kids, and not in the mode of like, he's a this, he's a that, or whatever. I'll be sympathetic or empathetic, and sometimes, it's like, whoa, okay, I didn't realize that was going on. But ultimately, I think what I've learned and what I've passed on is kind of emphasizing to them that, particularly if they have kids, you're going to be a family no matter what. You're just a divorced family. You have 2 houses, which means you actually are going to have a relationship with this person. So how can you figure things out in a way that no one's sort of pouring acid on each other and, kind of making it harder for both of you to be happy later on?
Yeah.
And that's hard.
Did you experience that in your own separation, where your friends and social circle were dividing into Team Everett and Team your?
Yeah.
Did that happen?
Actually, not really. There were people. So I guess that you could divide it. There were people who, I knew and Julie knew really, really well for years, and they're always going to be on Team Everett or Team Julie. Team Everett, Team Julie might mean that they're the ones who are like giving me the most stick because they know me really well, and they're like, dude, you're messing up here, you need to really step up here or whatever. So that didn't mean it's like unequivocal support, or unequivocal positive support. Sometimes the support meant you got to get your shit together.
Right. Although maybe some of that sometimes is that you were the role model marriage for them, and so they really need you.
Absolutely.
To stick it through.
Yeah,
for their own emotional needs.
we surprised most people by getting divorced. Most people thought we were like happy, married, good people couple, and so it definitely surprised a lot of folks. But to get to your question, most people didn't divide. We actually had a communication strategy. We were like, we wanted to make sure that everybody knew only after we had decided. Like, we didn't drib the information out. And we said, we are separating. We're still going to be a family. We're still going to be in the area. We're going to be in Oakland. We're both going to be parents. And we need your support to help us be a new family. Which told everybody, here's the direction we're going in, and we need your help. That was the overall meta message. If people then kind of said, well, you should do this, and she's a this or he's a that, we're like, no, even privately, no. We're going in this direction. I may be angry as hell at this person, and she may be angry as hell at me, but we're going in that direction because we know that's where we want to end up. And so people who weren't on that program actually started to fall away. And in contrast, even if they were on Team Everett, and people who I didn't even know were that supportive or had real experiences to share, stepped up into that because they were really motivated to sort of say, hey, I really like the way that you're approaching this. Let me see how I can be helpful.
That's really inspiring. That's really amazing. What a great team you two were coming out with the announcement. But a little bit ago, you were saying you had some difficulties for a good year and a half.
Yeah.
How did it go from this great sort of teamwork, this announcement, and go into conflict after that?
Yeah, sure. So I think the best way I can say it is that we always agreed on how to raise our daughter and sort of where that can go. So that provided a real strong baseline. I knew we both wanted to be part of her life. We both wanted to stay in a place. We wanted two homes. So that actually sets up a lot of other things that are going to be stable and standard. So that helped us a lot. On how we manage our relationship, like everybody's got different ways of doing bills, for example, or how much laundry should you fold and all that kind of stuff. So there's ups and downs in there and differences of opinion. Where we faltered was sort of our, kind of interaction, our romantic side and so forth. And, that's hard to, especially if you're a parent, that's hard to really pay attention to. And I learned a ton about kind of how I want to be different in that arena. And I'm sure she has as well. So we just focused on the parts that we really agreed with, and the romantic side of things was not going to be an issue. We were getting divorced, so the personal issues would come up from time to time, but more often than not, it was just a flare, and then I'd go back, or she'd go back and say, okay, where are we trying to go? We're trying to get to a place where both of us have a great home for our kid, we're able to move on, etc.
You've mentioned a couple times now, sort of learning how to be a father in this new context. Do you look at yourself as a different father now than you were before?
No, but I've had to express different things. I was lucky in that I spent a lot of time with Dami right from when she was an infant. Both of us took consulting jobs so we could work a lot from home. So I spent a lot of the first 8 months, which I think was hugely important. And through her toddler years, etc., I spent a lot of time, which I sort of appreciate even more now. The biggest transition was how to explain to this person who didn't deserve to be placed in a situation that was not going to be her best situation, to live in two houses. I mean, every kid wants both their parents together in one place. How do you explain that? So I had to dig deep to try and just figure that out. So that was, and then that reinforcement continues to this day. She's very clear on why we're apart, and we get along really well. But there's moments where she looks around and says, "I'm the only kid with two houses. That feels weird." So I always have to stay with that. Yeah.
When does that ever happen? It seems like around us.
Yeah, no.
All over.
She perceives that. I'm not sure if that's true, but she perceives that. How else have I had to be a different father? Well, I mean, just practically, when I have her, I have to truncate everything else I'm doing. Social life becomes very different. I think the other thing it makes me want to do, or I've done, is like, how do I create rituals and habits and interactions that she'll remember as really positive ones with me, because those sorts of, like, not the big family vacations, but I kind of believe like it's the daily little things that stick in somebody's mind and make people think that, wow, I remember singing in the car to this song, or listening to Oliver Nelson and learning the instruments, or we planted a garden back there, and so we always grow tomatoes and some other things back there. It's the going out and watering things together. That's the stuff that I started paying more attention to, those habits.
You said you had another thought about when you realized you were out of the bottom. Is that?
You have things that you do with your spouse or your ex-spouse that were common, and one of the things that my ex and I did was ride bicycles. So we did a bike race called the Gran Fondo every single year since it started, and we were going to do it that same year. And we didn't go up together, we didn't stay in the same place, but we knew we were going to be in the ride. There may be a little bit. I wasn't going with anybody. There wasn't going to be any kind of, there wasn't going to be any drama from that standpoint. But we knew we were both in the ride. So we were riding, or I'm riding, riding with friends or whatever, and, it's a 60-mile ride, so it gets strung out. And lo and behold, we're in the same place. And we rode together for 15 miles. And we're just chatting and suffering and going down hills and so forth and so on. And then, there was a rest stop, and, I think I stopped and she kept going, or vice versa. And I remember thinking, wow, that was great. It was easy. It was something we loved doing. It gave us, it's something that made us feel good together. It's history and so forth. And there wasn't any residual. It wasn't necessarily, oh, I missed it, nor thank God she's away. It was just riding. And that was a sort of like a realization that a veil had lifted somewhere in history, but that kind of focused it to know that there was an activity that we used to do that we still can do. Yeah. And that was good.
That's great. How long after the separation was that?
2 years.
2 years.
Yeah. We had started moving down that path, but that was one of those moments that kind of crystallized that we were going to go we were heading in the right direction. That's
nice. It's a good thing to aspire to. Let me switch it up to talk about cooking a little bit, because you mentioned cooking as something that as you made your own home here and got more time alone with your daughter, or something that you do a lot, do together. So I see some beautiful things that you pictures of on Instagram and stuff that you post that you've made. Were you always a good cook? Were you a good cook before and interested in cooking?
Yeah, so I didn't grow up in a cooking household. I mean, I grew up in the era where good momness meant, vegetables came in cans, right? I started to learn how to cook in college because I moved on campus. I was with 3 women, and they taught me how to use a wok and so forth, and I had to learn how to cook for myself. And also, I remember like I was in the mode of playing, lean cuisines, right? And realizing that I could make a linguine and clam sauce because it's $1 for a whole box of spaghetti and a little tin of. I mean, I just did the math. I was like, I could get 4 meals out of just the cost of 1. So it's very much about kind of practical stuff. So I became interested over time and developed a love for cooking and so forth. My ex actually was also got trained at a Michelin 1-star restaurant, so she was an incredible cook as well. And so that was one of the things we did together. And so afterwards, it was a combination of practical, like, okay, got to feed myself, got to feed the kid, and then kind of relaxing or creative, like I could make something up. If I'm by myself, I don't have to tell anybody that was terrible. That's not going to get on Instagram, that's for sure. But it became a habit that was really nice to be able to rely on.
Do you feel like that's universal, or do you think it's just sort of specific to you? I mean, everybody eats. And that's because I guess I think it's universal. Everybody eats, of course. But I feel like everybody should have some level of comfort that if they're standing around a kitchen by themselves, they can throw something together and eat.
Yeah.
That's not previously frozen.
I think, it's interesting. I think I didn't tell the story of sort of how I really kind of, what I'd say the light bulb went on with being a cook, but I think it's applicable here. So, as I said, I thought cooking was magic, right? The people who don't have recipes and they just kind of throw things together and it's better than anything you ever tasted. So I got this thing called the African News Cookbook. I was in my Afrocentric phase, and I remember following the recipe. And I was an engineer undergrad, and I could follow a recipe. It's just chemistry, right? And it came out right. I was like, I paid attention to the thing, I did all the steps, and it came out right. And it tasted really good. Oh, wait a minute. If I can follow directions, I can be a decent cook. Cool. I mean, literally, that simple insight was enormous for me because I thought I had to be something. I just had to follow directions. Right. So even now, what I think is universal is, yeah, you can follow directions if you want to. You do have to pay attention to it, which gets a little bit more, I wouldn't say spiritual quite, but it sort of becomes a very mindful activity. If you're doing it while you're watching a game or doing work or whatever, yeah, you're going to screw it up. So there's something about being able to focus on that thing. I like simple stuff. A lot of times it's like 3 ingredients and done. But buying really good ingredients and making something that tastes simple and nice is beautiful. So
I think I'm developing this theory that paying attention to these elemental things is kind of a path to help you be mindful.
Oh God, yeah.
Right, because it's like we were talking about before. When everything in your life is sort of confused or going not great.
Yeah.
Having to pay attention to your kid's schedule, that elemental relationship that you have with your family, it's something that you do, but you can't do without being there. You've got to be present. You have to do it, or it doesn't come out right.
Right.
And it's the same thing with making food.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't be. You couldn't say this about, I don't know, everyone should take up building Lego projects. Yeah, if you don't build a Lego project, it doesn't come out right. But who cares?
Yeah, right.
It's not about you're going to put it in your body and make it part of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah. I think that's right. I mean, I think sort of mindfulness and elemental activities really go hand in hand. One of my favorite things to do is to do walking meditations in San Francisco. I'm just walking down the street, but slower, and I'm noticing things and things like that. And I can do that for 5 minutes. I can do it for an hour. I can do it for 2 minutes before a presentation. It doesn't really matter. But going back to cooking, I do think it's sort of like, yes, it's elemental, but it's a pathway to a larger experience, and you can't design the experience. You can't even like hope for the experience. Just focus on the elemental stuff. Okay, I've got some onions, I've got some garlic, I got some tomatoes, I got some pasta. I'm going to put it together, and I'm going to eat it. And that's all that I need to do.
There's this point, coming back to like following a recipe. There's this point where you go from following a recipe and another one, and you realize, oh, I just see ingredients and I can envision how they can be.
Absolutely.
How does that happen?
Oh, well, here's how it happened for me, and I think about this a lot, actually. I first started doing African cooking, and one of the things that's part of that is there's a lot of these mixture of spices. You know, the curries and the influences of India, the masalas and things like that. The Moroccan spices are often very big mixes. So I got a sense of like there's lots of ingredients that can go into things. Then I did Thai cooking, and there's different ingredients that go into that to make that smell that a million miles away is Thai, right? It's not just this type of chili; it's a different kind of chili. Okay, but they have the same function. I started then going to Italian cooking. That was just following my curiosity, whatever. They have red pepper, but it's a different red pepper. But all of a sudden you realize it's the same function, and if it's got the same function, maybe I can swap this pepper for that pepper. Wonder what it's like if I use a Thai chili with my Italian stuff. Or you have noodles in both Thai cooking and Italian cooking. What if I did a rice noodle and what if and actually, pad thai, I'm sure I made a pad thai where I didn't have rice noodles, I had spaghetti. Is it going to kill me? No. And, okay, it's a little different. Now I know why rice noodles are a little bit better, but maybe I can adopt it. Okay, cool. I started to learn that there are different functions, and eventually I started to learn flavors. Like, Thai is very much about sour, then sweet, and then heat is kind of like an independent variable.
Yeah.
And once we learned that, I took a cooking class and they described soup in that way. I was like, oh, that's how you construct a soup. That's what they're thinking about. They're not thinking about the ingredients. They're thinking about the functions and the tastes. They're not thinking. And then when you start to do tastes, you think, oh, so salt is going to enhance a lot of flavors, or bitter and sweet are going to be in tension with each other. Now I can start to put pepper in ice cream. What would happen if I put pepper in ice cream? Well, it balances out, right? I just do a little bit. And then you're off to the races. Then you get all kinds of weird combinations that you can come up with. So that for me, and I love that. And that's where actually now I'm in sort of probably, people would say I'm in the magic quadrant. But I'm thinking about, and my favorite type of cooking is I have two ingredients. I don't have the third that I would have ideally want. What do I have in the fridge that I can make up? Oh, if I do this and then soften it with that, I think that will work. And then I go. And, there's plenty of times where it doesn't come out so good. But a lot of times it's just a fun exploration. And sometimes you come up with things that are just like, whoa, even I didn't expect that was going to be good. Can I be as happy as I feel? Okay.
Yeah, and that's even happier than like executing like a really complicated recipe.
Right.
It just made it happen.
Just made it happen, and then you got to remember what the heck just happened. So, anyway.
We don't have enough time to cover all the topics that I would love to go over with you.
Oh, can I mention one other thing about cooking though?
Yeah.
Well, actually, two things. One is, I really enjoy cooking with my daughter, not just because it's teaching her something that she's going to use, something's elemental, and the confidence around that. It's also time, daddy-daughter time, but it's also math and chemistry, and so we do all sorts of math equations while we're cooking. Hey, this recipe says it's for 8. We only have 2. Can you give me how much of this I'm supposed to put in? And she gets all excited because she wants to like kind of do the math and do it in her head or do whatever. And that's fun. So why do you think this is happening? Why is it boiling now as opposed to when it was I had before? What did I add that changed it? And so we start talking about chemistry. And that's really fun, and it's a good way to kind of spend time and make cooking a different thing. And that gets interesting. The other thing I would say is, for me anyway, it's cool to have guys' night out and go to dinner and so forth. It's another thing to bring people into your home. And it doesn't have to be a big thing, but like you cook hamburgers or you have a pizza and you not decorate it, you sort of season it yourself with your friends. Or you make spaghetti and people come over and bring different things and you have people at your table. That is sort of filling your home with all this new energy that you want in your life, right? And especially after divorce, you feel like everything's emptied out and leaking, How am I going to put this back together again? One thing I did a lot of was have people over. And they would fill the space with stuff. Some people brought things, they'd bring gifts, but mostly they brought themselves. And I don't know about you, but when I have people over and everybody leaves, there's this moment where I can still feel them reverberating in the house, and I just kind of sit there with it. Yeah. And that changes the way that the house, my relationship to the house, because now I know that I can create something that works for more than just myself. I'm part of something bigger, as they like to say. So
yeah, it is essential to have that group, and it's even more meaningful or more easily meaningful when you bring people together over food.
Yeah, yeah. You all got to eat.
Yeah.
What are you doing on a Friday? You all got to eat. I got an extra something to this. Bring some wine. We live in this amazingly abundant place where we can get access to amazing fresh food at a moment's notice. And spend the time to make it. It's really cool. And I now have a couple of friends that I love cooking with, because it's like the dirty little secret. The people who are having most of the fun are the people in the kitchen. Yeah. So anyway, I just wanted to add that piece because I think it's important for me.
Fantastic. We actually. I need to wrap up soon because this is making me hungry.
Right. I
gotta eat.
Yeah.
I gotta get down the peninsula by
Yeah.
Now I need to eat something good before I get down there. All right. I'm just gonna do a hard turn here and just try to have a few questions about dating.
Yeah.
Just because we actually haven't talked about it at all through the whole afternoon.
Sure.
And I feel like you're probably a guy who's pretty successful dating when you want to be.
When I want to be, which is a thing, yeah.
Can you describe where you are now in your romantic life and what road you took to get there?
Sure. So I think so many things to say about this. So I think one thing that was important right after the divorce was knowing I'm going to have a rebound of some sort and being fair to somebody who was, asked out on a date or whatever, like, here's the situation. I didn't want to say, hey, I'm a mess, some of this, some of that, or anything. I mean, that doesn't go over well, right?
That's literally what my first date was like.
Yeah, right.
Literally.
Right.
And this one was a therapist, and she basically said, you should not be dating.
Yeah, right. And you kind of there's awkward ones, right? Okay, fine. But mostly is like, okay, what I realized from previous breakups is that I have these ingrained habits of familiarity, and you're just used to it. You're used to being able to be really candid, or used to being able to tell really off-color jokes, and you forget this person doesn't actually know you. And so all of a sudden you say this, and you're like, the other person's like, their eyes go wide, and you're like, oh, right, damn. And there's also an expectation of what intimacy looks like, and all these things are like out of whack. So for me, it took a while to sort of just be gentle with myself and say, I'm going to have some really awkward dates or some ridiculous experiences and take the air out of the balloon. I'm not trying to start a long relationship afterwards. And certainly women are smart enough to know that right after divorce is not really great long-term dating material. once that's established, then it's actually much more relaxing. So that was good. The second was how to.
Would you say
go ahead.
that was a particular time phase for you?
Yeah, I would say. I'm still kind of reinventing it, but I think it was certainly within the first 4 to 6 months where I could reasonably expect that I'd probably have a really weird date. And because of me, not because of the other person. The second thing I remember coming out of it was, am I going to run into my ex? Am I going to run into my ex on a date that she's in? If there's a negotiation around kids, is it because I'm going on a date? What do I say if all that kind of stuff. So that kind of put, kind of some tension, and that took a while to kind of let go. Then I think I found actually dating people who had been divorced because they had kids, or often they had kids. I think particularly people who had kids, since I do as well. We kind of knew that we were constrained with time. And we knew that the other person, both of us were not looking for a mom or a dad. They weren't looking for someone to take care of their kid. It's like, we're adults. We know how to take care of our stuff. We're actually looking for some adult time, some fun adult time. And that is harder for someone who's never been married before to understand that there's those constraints. Some people get it, but a lot of people have never had that occur. And so trying to manage that. And so I found that conversation went a heck of a lot easier with somebody who was in a similar situation. There was a lot that you didn't have to explain. So that actually tended to be the most kind of easy to navigate relationships. It also created a lot of candor because clearly both people had experience where they believed in public that their life was going to go this way, and their life went that way. And there's a certain humility that comes along for the ride, or could come along for the ride. And so that conversation about what it means to be in a relationship has a lot more depth. And so I've always appreciated that since that time. Gosh, what else could I say? I think the other thing is it's changed my perspective on long-term relationships and what I want out of them, whether I believe in the same way. Well, I definitely don't believe in the same way. I'm not against being married again, but I'm not. I've spent a lot of time actually realizing how constructed the institution of marriage is. And how there's this woman named Esther Perel, I don't know if, who's just, she's amazing. And some others who've really kind of said, this thing of modern marriage is actually really, really recent, despite what you think. People got married for all sorts of reasons. And the thing that stuck with me probably most is our modern kind of idea of marriage is that the other person is supposed to be everything. Lover, confidant, secure person, adventurous person, mother, what do you call it? There's all sorts of things. Your professional, your professional partner, your partner in crime, whatever it happens to be. All these different attributes, often in conflict with one another, and it just puts a lot of pressure on the other person. It also puts a lot of pressure on me that I should have all these expectations and trying to fulfill them all. I've let that all go now, and said, wow, you know what? There isn't one person who's going to take all of those. There may be one person who I focus on, but one person is not going to be all these things. There's going to be multiple people who represent sort of people I can talk about in my professional life, or being an entrepreneur, or being a dad, or whatever. And my ideal person will be some of those, but I don't think they'll be all of them. And for some people, that's really disappointing. And, that's probably was not going to fit. Other people, they will be, we will interact in a particular way for a very limited time. And if I can be really present for that limited time, and then at the ending of that relationship happens in a way that both of us kind of go forth and are wonderful apart, that's great. I think there was, just to be more specific, there's a person who I had dated where, she wanted to get married again. She hadn't had kids, and, she was thinking about it in like the 3 to 5 year period. But she was active in that. This is important to her. But we definitely had sort of a nice interaction and a nice attraction to each other. And we had a candid conversation. I'm like, I'm not that guy. And in fact, so I don't want to, if you're sort of saying, I only have a limited amount of time, I don't want to waste time dating you if you're not going to be that guy, you shouldn't waste time. On the other hand, if we should go on dates, or if we go on go see the ACT every 6 months and we have a really fabulous time, that would be awesome. Or more, or less, or we go see a show, whatever it happens to be. And it took all the tension out of the relationship. Yeah. Took all the tension away and I said, there will be a day where you're going to say, hey, Everett, you know what? I met this guy, and he's amazing, and I think we have the same kind of direction in life, and, I want to focus on that person. I would, there may be times where I would feel, oh, man, this would have been fun. Ultimately, I'm like, that's awesome. Be with that person, and because we've already established that in the long term, that's not a good fit. But in a short term, we can actually have a really meaningful relationship. I would have never thought that was possible 10 years ago.
Yeah, it's interesting what that makes me think is that there's this huge benefit to having had this experience, the life experience, the experience of divorce, and then in our case, the experience of having kids. There's this benefit that frees you up in your relationships, because whatever you may believe now about what an ideal relationship is or isn't, whatever childhood ideas you've tossed aside, certainly what you're not doing is hurtling towards marriage.
Yeah.
You're not hurtling towards
is a great
having a family, hurtling towards fulfilling some ideal. You can just be, and then have this relationship, and have it be as good as it can be, have it take the form it's going to take, and it's not distracted by these other goals, which are really kind of inessential.
No, I think hurtling is a great word for what feels like happened before. And what is so clearly not is clearly advantage of being able to be in this space.